Yeehaw!
Welcome to Hillbilly History, where we tell the forgotten stories of Eastern Kentucky and the surrounding area. These tales are made possible by the Corbin Public Library in beautiful downtown Corbin, Kentucky. Today's story features the feud of 1901 between the Shotwell clan and the White clan. I'm Tiffany, your storyteller, and with us today is our special guest, Elijah, from the Corbin Public Library.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
How are you doing today, Elijah?
I'm doing great.
The feud that took place in 1901. Had you ever heard about it before I mentioned it to you?
Absolutely not.
And it took place right here in Corbin. Is Corbin your hometown?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So did you realize that Corbin was even more of a wild place than, say, something like Tombstone, Arizona, or the Wild West?
No, but I could believe it. I could see it happening, being a wild place.
What do you think Corbin was like in 1901?
I'd imagine a lot of wagons.
Yep.
I'd imagine no cars, a lot of foot traffic, probably saloons. I'd imagine people in top hats and long coats.
Yeah, in 1901, we didn't even have paved roads. Everything was dirt at the time. 1901, interesting, it was the year peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were invented.
Oh, that deserves a hand clap. That's
agree,
like the greatest thing. Every grandparent always says that ain't nothing better than that's the next best thing besides peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
I agree. 1901, most people didn't even have indoor plumbing. I think it was just a small fraction of the U.S. had a bathtub.
Was it a bathtub or a wash tub?
Exactly.
I know, but I know I've had, like, my grandparents tell me stories of it, them bringing buckets of water in and just being like a big old, tub that you would put as an antique or something in your house.
Right,
but they would
right.
wash in it, like they would do that.
For our listeners, we are in Eastern Kentucky. Contrary to popular belief, we do have shoes.
We do. I'm wearing some.
Plumbing.
I'm wearing some right now. I enjoy my bathroom and my AC unit.
So we're going to talk about the Shotwell and the White clan. So first of all, let's talk about the Shotwells. Now, this story takes place in 1901 in Corbin, Kentucky. So we've got our patriarch, James Shotwell. He's about 50 years old. We've got his son, John Shotwell, another son, Charles, and another son, Robert. We've got a daughter, Molly. Now, Molly was about 18 years old. And then they've got some friends. Now, the friends are in Clay County. That's the Chadwell clan. And then we've got the McCard clan, which are also friends of theirs. In the 1900 census, they are on Laurel Avenue, which incidentally is right next to our library. And our story is going to take place on Saloon Row, which again is right by our library. And most people in this town don't even know the story. Now, to get some background on the Shotwells, I'm going to read a story from a newspaper. This was April 12th, 1899. So this is before our story took place. One killed, two shot as the result of a fight at Corbin last evening. Police Judge Moffett and an old respected citizen is a corpse, and W.G. Holland and another gentleman are badly wounded. A countryman named Shotwell and two sons got drunk and attempted to take the town. Judge Moffett and others tried to arrest them when they began shooting with the above results. Shotwell was arrested and taken to the Williamsburg jail, but the two boys are at large with a posse in pursuit. Now, the question is, are these our Shotwells? So, Elijah, if you want to read the next article, we'll see if it matches up to James, John, Charles, or Robert.
Okay, the article says, one killed, another mortally wounded. Williamsburg, Kentucky, April 12th, 1899. James Shotwell and his son were drunk and disorderly at Corbin. This county, when Marshal Bingham undertook their arrest, they resisted and police Judge Moffett was instantly killed. William Holland, at whose house the shooting occurred, was mortally wounded. The Shotwells were arrested.
Now, somehow they avoided going to the state penitentiary because they are roaming free in 1901, and this was in 1899. So now we've got to look at our White clan. They had moved from Virginia to Corbin in about 1886 after the death of their patriarch. We've got Rolla. He's sometimes called Raleigh in some papers, White. He's about 22 years old. He had just come back from the Philippine-American War where he served as a mercenary. We've got Roach White. He's the brother of Rolla's. He owns a hotel. We've got William White, another brother. He owns a restaurant and grocery store on Saloon Row. And we've got their mother. Of course, it's got to be Betty White. And then we've got to talk about some other people who are going to be in our story. We've got Sheriff James Sutton. Sheriff James Sutton, he's the sheriff here in Corbin. And he's got a backstory that is fascinating. The year prior, our governor, the governor of Kentucky, was shot and killed in Frankfort. Now, Sheriff James was questioned about this shooting. He had taken a prisoner up to Frankfort, which is the capital, to be arrested, held in jail. And while he was up there, the governor gets shot and killed. Now, that's a whole nother story, but the governor was shot by some mountain men from Corbin, Williamsburg, Barberville. So from this area, they had gone up. It was a disputed election. They had gone up there, killed the governor. Well, Sheriff Sutton had a bit of a drinking problem. Of course. He gets drunk. He decides, whoa, the governor's been killed. I better get out of here. So he gets on a train, and he takes the train up to Louisville. Now, once he gets up there, he decides he's going to check into a hotel. So he goes into the Victoria Hotel. He gets up to the clerk, and he says, I didn't shoot Goebel, but I know who did. And the clerk is like, wait, what? Uh-oh. What? You know who shot the governor? So they give him a room up on the 3rd floor of the Victoria Hotel. He checks in, he's in there, and the clerk goes and gets the police. Well, the police come, and they're banging on the door, but our Sheriff Sutton, he's not answering the door. Instead, he leaps from the 3rd-story window and takes off running. This guy actually ran. And the police obviously catch him because he's drunk. They take him in, they question him, they ask him questions, and he just keeps repeating, I didn't shoot Goebel, but I know who did. And they can't get any more information out of him. So they put him in the drunk tank for the night. The next day, they bring him out, re-question him, and he says, What do you mean? What are you talking about? He thinks he's still in Frankfort. He doesn't remember taking the train. He doesn't remember checking into the hotel. He doesn't remember jumping from the 3rd-story window. He doesn't remember anything. So that is our sheriff that's going to be in this story. They were going to hold him. They were going to arrest him for the murder of the governor. But what happened was they sent word down to Frankfort, and the whole town was in such disarray. Nobody knew if the Republicans were in charge or the Democrats. So they couldn't actually get a warrant to hold him. So they had to let him go. He comes back to Corbin in time for our story. And then we've got our deputy sheriff. His name is Sutton Ferris. We've got Susan Elizabeth Sudie McFarland Cox. She is described in the papers as well-known. She's colorful. They're trying to tell us something without telling us. So I think we can guess what her profession is. We've got Colonel R.D. Williams. He commands our state militia. We've got Mr. Harnd. He's a traveling salesman from the East. And we've got our town drunk who is going to end up being our hero of the day.
Go.
Yes.
Go. We don't know his name.
No one knows his name. No one knows who it actually was.
That's right, kids. Not all heroes wear capes.
Not all heroes wear capes. So let's get to the story. So it's Wednesday, January 16, 1901. We are in front of Hagen's Drugstore. I believe this was probably somewhere along Saloon Row. It's around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. James, the patriarch of the Shotwell clan, he runs into Rolla. Rolla, remember, is the 22-year-old hothead, and they meet on the street. Well, they get into a big argument while they meet. And James tells Rolla, I don't want you coming around my house no more. You're not going to marry Molly. You stay away from her. The whole clan is against this union. This marriage is not going to take place. You leave her alone. You stay away from her. Well, Rolla,
I can imagine him saying, get away from my daughter.
Right. So I don't know what happened that precipitated this deal, because clearly Rolla was going to marry the girl, but now the wedding is off.
So it started over a woman. is what we're
Well,
reading.
it pretty much that's most how most fights start.
That's what the fire sparked. That's what sparked the fire.
Well, Rolla, he's not going to back down to this James Shotwell. Now, this is the same James Shotwell who tried to take over the town a few years earlier. He's not backing down. He pulls out a pistol and he shoots James 3 times in the stomach, right there in front of Saloon Row, broad daylight, 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
He really is a Shotwell now.
He is. They are not playing, right? You do not mess with the Shotwells. So what ended up happening is Rolla walks away and he goes to his brother's grocery store restaurant on Saloon Row. And then, of course, the Shotwells get wind of what's happened and they are mad as can be. Now, they are literally on either side of the train tracks. The Saloon Row's on one side and the Shotwells live on the other side of the tracks, just 2 streets down. Well, they start firing at each other. So the 3 men making up the White Clan square off against the Shotwell clan. And I love the way one newspaper put it, if you want to read that.
They drew up on each side of the dead line, ready to fight.
The deadline being the railroad tracks. So around 4 o'clock, John Shotwell, he was in Williamsburg. He had been in court. Doesn't say what he was there for. Probably something else he did wrong. He hears about what's happened and he hops the train back and he rounds up more support and they are going to launch an attack on the grocery and they are ready to lynch Rolla. Rolla's going to die tonight. He's no way this kid's going to survive. Well, they are fighting and the shots are just flying back and forth across the railroad tracks. Well, at some point, a freight train comes, a really long, slow train, and they're cut off from one another. So they're going to have to take a break in the fight. The feud's going to have to take a break. So the Whites retreat to the restaurant. They're going to get something to eat. And the Shotwell clan, they break for some, the newspapers say, refreshments.
That just shows that even back then how civil people were. Even though they're in the middle of a fight, they're shooting, they want to kill each other. They still take a lunch break.
Well, you got to. And the Shotwells they're going to refuel with some liquid refreshment. Okay, so that's how they put it. So they clearly are getting loaded once again.
Probably drunk.
Yeah, I'm sure. So after the train passes, Deputy Sheriff goes into the restaurant. Now, he's brokered a deal with the Shotwells. If you let me take Rolla in, and without problem, the Shotwells are willing to let all this go, and it will be the end of hostilities. And so they know they got him dead to rights. He did it in broad daylight in front of everybody. He shot James. So they say, okay, yeah, you can take him in. Well, then the whole building shook. Can you imagine what they did? It's 6:30 at night now. There's an explosion. The White's grocery store has been blown up and it is now on fire. Now the firefight is serious. The Shotwells are shooting at what remained of the restaurant, a grocery store, and the people in the restaurant are trying to shoot, and Deputy Ferris is in there shooting at the Shotwells. Well, Susan Cox, our woman of the night, she's found dead from stray bullets, and some reports say that she had peeped around the back of her house and got a bullet to the brain for her troubles. Well, now the place is on fire. Saloon Row is on fire. A drunk man comes out of the tavern. He doesn't even notice the bullets flying back and forth. He just notices the fire. So he decides he is the person to put out the fire. He runs across the street to the train depot where there's a pump. He grabs a bucket and he starts pumping water and he runs over and douses the flames. The whole time he's screaming, fire, fire, fire. No one's coming to help him and he can't figure out why. But he's staggering back and forth. He makes 3 trips in all and he actually extinguishes the fire. So he is the man who saved Saloon Row because everything would have burned down.
Let's give that man a hand clap.
Absolutely.
I love how, this is happening and he just got this side quest.
Right?
But
it gets better. It gets better. So he goes to hang up the bucket back on the pump and he notices the bucket is full of holes. The bucket has been shot full of holes while he was making his trips. I mean, this man, what a great guy. Now, in the restaurant eating was a salesman. His name is Mr. Harnd. Back then, they used to call the traveling salesman, they used to call him drummer. So he's a drummer from the East, and he's eating at the restaurant. Well, when he was eating, he had made some comments about, oh, Kentucky feuds ain't nothing, because he watched them shoot across the tracks and thought, oh, this isn't no big deal. Everybody makes a big deal about these Kentucky feuds. They just build it up. It's really nothing. Until, of course, the building that he was in eating exploded. So he had a coffee cup in one hand, a saucer in the other hand, and the force of the explosion blew the saucer out of his hand. It hit him in the chin as it flew back behind him, and of course his cup was gone too and coffee all over him. Well, he manages to escape the wreckage, but as soon as he gets outside, he is met with one of the Shotwells. And what did the Shotwells say to him?
Get in the fight or get out the way. That goes around here.
Yep. So he needs to get in the fight or get out of the way. Well, Mr. Harn, being a man from the East who has no beef in this fight, says, I'm just going to go ahead and get out of the way. He says, look, I'm just trying to get to the White Hotel, okay? Because one of the brothers owns a hotel. And the Shotwells say, oh, no. You don't want to go there. We're going to go shoot that place up next. None of the whites are going to survive. So he says, okay, I'll go somewhere else. So finally, at 3 a.m., Mr. Harn and every other person visiting Corbin that day gets on the 3 a.m. train for Louisville. Everybody is getting out of Corbin because it is just too wild and crazy for them. Now, next, the Shotwells were true to their word, and they went over to Roach's Hotel, and they shot it full of holes. Now, the white's grandmother was there with the grandkids, and when the shooting began, they hid under feather beds to protect themselves. So luckily, they survived, and they weren't injured. Now, by midnight, the firefight had started to die down, and Deputy Sheriff Ferris, he had lost his hat in the explosion. He must have really liked that hat, because he thought, okay, it's safe now. I can look for my hat. So he lights a lamp, and he starts to look for his hat, and I just love the way the newspaper put it. Go ahead.
He stood up with the lamp, and in a moment, there was the bay of a .44 Winchester. Ferris was shot through the heart and fell dead to the ground.
Yep, he was killed. So now Sheriff Sutton, remember, our drunk sheriff, he rounds up a posse and he deputizes some men because he is going to try and take back the town. And so while they're attempting to clear the debris of the grocery store, there's still gunfire happening. They're coming under constant barrage of gunfire. And that's when they find the body of the Deputy Ferris. And then they find the three white brothers hiding in the back, which that part of the restaurant that hadn't been completely damaged by the explosion. Well, the three white brothers report to the sheriff that they were too afraid to light a lamp after what happened to Deputy Ferris. William White, so the owner of the grocery store, he is left blind from the explosion. And their mother, she's injured from the explosion. Some reports say there were up to a dozen people inside, and we don't know how many were injured or what happened to those people. So now that was all on Wednesday. So we're going to jump ahead to Thursday, 3 a.m. So we got through midnight. Now we're at 3 a.m. the next day. Sheriff Sutton is going to take Rolla into Williamsburg. That's the county seat where he's going to put him in jail. But the Shotwell gang gets wind that Rolla and the sheriff are on the train. So what do? They want to kill Rolla. They're going to lynch him. They get on the train. Well, Sheriff Sutton says, oh no, we can't have this. So Sheriff Sutton and Rolla have to jump off of the train to save themselves.
That's crazy.
Right? So they do eventually get him down to Williamsburg. Now, throughout the day, the clans start gathering, and this time, the Shotwells, they've done it. They've taken the town. They own the town. So the Chadwells come up from Clay County, and then the McCargs come into town, and everyone's gathering around the Shotwells, and there's people just marching up and down the street, and they all got their Winchester rifles out, and they're talking about having a good old-fashioned Kentucky shootout to solve this problem up somewhere in the mountains of Gray. They're going to go to a mountaintop, and they're just going to have a good old Kentucky shootout. Now, oddly, the whites were all for this. They just wanted this to end. If this is how we end it, this is how we end it. So by 10 a.m., James, the father, he dies from the bullet wounds. So he was around 50 years old at that time. And so again, that whole day, Shotwell's owned the town. For one day, they've held the town. And there's nothing that the sheriff and his posse can do, because when they go to arrest him, there's a whole line of rifles pointed at him. And they just said, okay, you win. So now on Friday before sunrise, so the next day, Friday, the state militia arrives in town. Now this is under the command of Colonel Williams, R.D. Williams. And of course, he's looking for the sheriff. The sheriff was supposed to meet him at the train, but he didn't show up. So Colonel Williams sends out some of his guys and some of his militiamen to go look for the sheriff. They can't find him. Eventually, they do finally figure out where he is, but it said he was too drunk to assist. He couldn't help. He's been drinking. He's done. He's out. He can't assist them. So Colonel Williams says, okay, I'll just take care of it myself. So he orders the arrest of the Shotwell boys on grounds of intimidating. Now, they're loading up the Shotwell boys, some of the Chadwells, some of the McCargs. They're loading them up in the train. And it says that some of the people from the town go to the train. And you'd think they would be happy about this. Finally, the bullies are going to go to jail. They're going to be held accountable. But not so. It was mostly the Shotwell supporters. And they start hurling insults at the militia. And they openly threaten the militia. We'll kill you. We'll kill your family. You better not take them to jail. Well, the militia does their job. They're going to take them away. Now, when the militia came to town, they came with the Gatling gun. And they set that up right on Center Street for everyone to see that we're not playing anymore. This is it. The Gatling gun goes 360 in a circle. And I don't know how many bullets it fires, but it's pretty serious. And it was heavy firepower, so they were ready. So the Shotwells give up, and they're going to the jail in Williamsburg. So both the Shotwells and the Whites, they want the militia to leave town. And they tell them in no uncertain terms that they don't want interference from the law, that we can solve our own problems. That's how we do it around here, right? We don't need the law. In January, so we're still in January, the militia is still in town. They're still keeping the peace. But there's a funeral to be held in Rockholds. So for James, the father who died. And of course, the boys have been arrested. They're in jail, but they want to go to the funeral. So the judge says, yes, you can go to the funeral, but you're going to be under armed guard. So they took some of the law enforcement from Williamsburg, and they took the militiamen to the funeral in Rockholds, to the cemetery, to guard the Shotwell boys to make sure they didn't try and launch an escape. So now we're going to go on to what happened after all of this stuff, what happened with the trials. So Rolla goes on trial first. His started on January 25th, and he is charged with the willful murder of James Shotwell. It seems pretty cut and dried. It was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody saw him do it. He admitted to doing it, but it was a hung jury. They couldn't make a decision. Hung jury. And that decision came down on February 8th, 1901. They decided to let him off. What's interesting here is they didn't retry it. They could have done another trial, but they figured since they were forced to leave town to get away from the Shotwells, his brother had been blinded, his mother had been injured, they had blown up the grocery store, they had shot up the hotel, the Shotwells had already killed 2 people in response to this. They just weren't even going to bother. So they let him off the hook.
They just let him off the hook just because of how bad he was.
Because of the response from the Shotwells. Now, the Shotwell trials didn't go as straightforward. So on January 30th, 1901, their trial began.
That's my birthday.
Is it really?
Yes, January 30th.
Well, there you go. That's when their trials started. So they were being charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Now, Roach actually testified that he saw John Shotwell shoot and kill Deputy Sutton Ferris. And they had asked for bail. It was denied for John and Charles Shotwell, but their friends did get a bail set. Now, you have to understand that in 1901, the average salary for a year, an entire year, was between $200 and $400. And the bail that was set was between $2,000 and $4,000 a piece.
Wow.
So
you'd have to be rich or you're staying.
They did have bail, but it was never going to be of any use.
So did the Shotwells have money? I mean, were they a wealthy group,
No.
or was this just two? No. This was literally just two random hillbilly families just taking action and something they thought was right.
You got it.
That's
you got
crazy.
it. So on February 12, 1901, it came back with a hung jury. So the Shotwells got off the hook once again, but this time, I think because the state militia was involved, the governor was involved, everybody's involved now, they did a new trial. And that trial started in May. In that trial, John was convicted and given a life sentence. Robert was acquitted. So Robert is off the hook 100%. He can't be retried. But Charles had a hung jury. So John actually appealed and was granted a new trial. But so both John and Charles were retried, and they both ended up at that point with life sentences to be served in the state penitentiary. In October of 1901, another person had crossed the Shotwells. And this was a big story in this area in the news. They got on a train near Williamsburg, and they were hunting someone down. Well, everybody on the train knew who the Shotwells were, and they all freaked out, as you can imagine, and they were all hiding under the seats on the train. They were trying to hide from the Shotwells because it's like, oh, no, I don't want to get shot. Not again. They didn't find who they were looking for, so they did exit the train 3 miles down the tracks. In December of 1901, the Kentucky Court of Appeals upheld the life sentence for John and Charles, so now they're out of options. They're going to life in prison. Also in December of 1901, a cousin of theirs, Paris Shotwell, got charged and was convicted of the murder of Hiram Baker. And it was reported that a brother of Paris and the judge in the case had difficulty. So again, they were trying to intimidate people. In January of 1902, Paris joined his cousins, John and Charles, in the state penitentiary. So now the whole family's in the state pen. It's interesting to note, too, I don't have the article from the newspaper, but there was a woman, I think her name was Carol, and she testified in this trial against the Shotwells, and they stalked her. She was going for a walk somewhere, and they beat her, and they thought she was dead and left her in a ditch to die for testifying against them. So these guys were serious. Nobody wanted to testify against them, and that's why they never got in trouble before. In March 1906, so a few years later, Charles actually got released from prison because he was dying of consumption. He died on May 3rd of 1906. Now, we fast forward to 1907 in May. This is so crazy. They actually let John out of prison. They actually let him out. They gave him parole. Well, of course, within a month of being out, he started shooting Corbin up again. So he violated parole. So now he's going back to prison. And so there was a reward. So there's an article from May 1907. Reward for fugitive. Governor Beckham, upon recommendation of County Judge Browning of Whitley County, offered $500 reward for John Shotwell, a fugitive. Shotwell is the paroled convict ordered to return for violation of parole.
That's like a whole year. That's like a whole year of working.
It's a whole annual income. So if you can imagine in today's time, that's probably going to be around 50 grand because it's, $60,000.
If we go with the average, like low income, that's at least $30,000 or $40,000. I mean,
and this was, remember, there was between 200 and 400 was the average. So
that's five. That's an extra $100 that you could do saving or put
so
up
it was
with.
Even more than the average.
You would be
income.
Comfortable in those times with that kind of money for a whole year at least.
Yeah, exactly. Now you have another article there about what happened at the end.
It says, game to the last. Was this notorious Kentucky desperado. He had shot many officers and failed by bullet of Darling Sheriff back in pen and near death. It says on November 29th, the notorious desperado of and life convict John Shotwell is back in the Frankfort Penitentiary to serve out the remainder of his life sentence. We skip down a little bit. It says after serving several years and making a good record in prison, he secured a parole. He had been out but a short time when he violated his parole by shooting up the town of Corbin, Whitley County, and by other serious misconduct. After he was placed in prison, after in prison hospital today, an examination by the physician disclosed that Shotwell had 4 bullet wounds in his body, and he is unconscious tonight and will probably die. It is said 2 of the wounds were inflicted Saturday or Sunday night while he was in a fight in Corbin, many hours before Sheriff Hudgett arrested him. Huge.
Right. Yeah. So the Corbin police, he had escaped down to Tennessee. I think that's where he was ultimately captured, was in Tennessee. And so the Tennessee police worked with the Corbin police. They managed to get him. And his dying words, all he wanted to know was how many police did he take out? Because he wasn't going out alone. So I think the moral of our story is you don't mess with the clans of Corbin because your plans might just blow up in your face.
Indeed.
Right? And that is our story. It's a crazy, it just has that feel of an old West, old-timey kind of story. But it took place actually right here in Corbin. And I think a lot of people forget that these old-time gunslingers of the West, they started in this area. A lot of them came from Virginia. They came from Kentucky. They came from Tennessee. This is where they started. So these are the OGs, right? Like these are the OG gunslingers, and they all lived right here in our area. And we were able to get all of the newspaper articles and all of the research, and we did it right here at the Corbin Public Library. And we just want everyone to support your local library. Now, our library is interesting. We're an independent library. There aren't very many of them in the state. I think there's only 1 or 2. And so
we're the only city library in the whole state of Kentucky also.
Yeah.
Most libraries you find are county libraries, but
Correct.
We are a public city library.
Exactly. So we only get 1/3 of the funding that every other library in the state gets. So we would urge everyone to give if you can. There's a link to donate on the library webpage. Elijah, could you read the website?
Yes, it's CorbinKYLibrary.org.
You can go down there, scroll down to the bottom. You'll see a link to donate. Anything you can give is most appreciated, and it helps us do what we do, and it keeps the library open so we can continue to bring you these crazy stories of Eastern Kentucky.
Yes, there's a lot more to tell. This might be your family. We might have more to dig up. I know that the Shotwells, I'd never heard about this, but this is very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different things. I mean, Corbin's not only known for its old history back in the late 1900s, but we have KFC, Colonel Sanders, the Cumberland Falls. I mean, we have different stuff that a lot of people that live here take for granted.
Absolutely. And I know quite a few people with the last name McCarg, and they are still here in this area, and their families were absolutely involved, and they were sentenced to prison as well in this story. And the Chadwells are still here. So we do have a lot of the families that are still here.
I ain't met a Shotwell yet, though. Is there any remaining Shotwells that you know of? Or
I haven't met any. I don't know.
Well, if you're a Shotwell and you're listening to this, we would like to meet you. And you think that you have any connection to this family, we'd like to meet you. Come down to the library and talk to us.
I want to know what happened to Molly. Who did she marry? I looked through all the census data and all the information. I couldn't figure it out. But clearly she wasn't going to marry Rolla. So who did she marry? That's what I want to know.
The world may never know.
And it all started over Molly Shotwell, the trouble she has caused. Molly.
You know what's the craziest part about this whole story is like they are actually at appropriate ages, like 18 and 22. You know, usually they get married at like 13 back in this age. But
right.
I mean, these people were grown adults, so
yeah,
they can make their own decision.
It is crazy. It is crazy. All right. Well, thank you for listening. We appreciate you, and we look forward to coming to you again with another story. Stay tuned.